Hello, welcome to another episode of the DRH Show. As usual, in each episode, I'll be talking to interesting people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. Today, I'm joined by a counselor and a mental health advocate. She's also a spokesperson for the BACP. Glenda Roberts, thanks for joining me.
Okay, thank you so much for having me on your show today, Dennis. It's good to be here. Thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad, and I know you're really busy, Glenda, so I'm really appreciative of you taking the time to join the DRH show. But just to get the ball rolling, if you could just share to us your trajectory in life, your backstory, and how you ended up doing what you're doing.
Okay, so I'm an accredited psychotherapist, and I came into this profession many years ago because a family member had sustained a serious injury to the brain. So I became a carer, looked after this member of my family, and then sparked off an interest, strangely enough, in wanting to understand more about the physiology and the anatomy of the brain. So in kind of looking after this family member, I started then to study many years ago, and the study became a passion of mine, and everything kind of like just almost fell into place, really. And since then, I have started to work for a serious brain injury organisation called AK Case Management, where I managed quite a few of their clients with a brain injury or a spinal cord injury. And whilst I was doing that many years ago, I wanted to study more about counselling and psychotherapy. So my boss at the time, Angela Kerr, she always knew that I would one day spread my wings, as it were, leave her company and set up my own. So it was back in 2008 that I set up my own company, which is Dennis exploringU Counselling, which provides counselling, psychotherapy, rehabilitation, and also what else? CPD, so continuing professional development training as well. So apart from all of that, I am a mother of 3 young adults now. So I've always tried to separate my work from my personal life and try to find a balance with both of those things, because I think, Dennis, it's so important for professionals or for people in general to be able to do that. So that, I think, for me, fast forwarding all of those years ago and where I am now in 2020, I've managed to do that really successfully. And from there, I've managed to set up lots of different strands of my practice and develop lots of different processes and training programs, some of which we'll talk about afterwards. But it's been really great to be part of the mental health profession for so long. But thank you, Dennis. So that's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
It's really a wonderful journey how, from looking after someone who's been struggling with their, mental health, you managed to launch your own company. Of course, we'll talk more about that. But I would also like to talk us through about your role with BACP. And of course, for those who are not familiar, what is BACP? What's their role within the mental health landscape in the UK?
Okay, so the BACP stands for the British Association for Counsellors and Psychotherapists, and I think today they have about maybe 55 to 60,000 members, and I've been a member of the BACP I became an accredited member probably about 6 years ago now, and the membership body that I belong to, as it were, work with psychotherapists, counsellors, some psychologists as well, throughout not just the UK, but I think also Ireland and Wales and Scotland as well. And we also have members that also run their practices throughout not just the UK, but throughout Europe as well, and some other countries. Now, I've been a member, not just a member, but I've been an accredited member, like I say, for about 6 years ago, but also became a media spokesperson for the British Association for Counsellors and Psychotherapists. I think we're going back in 2017 now. So yeah, 2017, and this role is a voluntary role. I have to make that perfectly clear, but it comes by way of having quite a lot of experience earlier on in my practice years by being an agony aunt. I used to be an agony aunt for a magazine called Salad Days, who were based in Saffron Walden in Essex, and I got inundated, Dennis, regularly with lots of questions from members of the public. And before I took that role on many years ago, Dennis, I thought to myself, how I've never been an agony aunt before. How am I going to get used to providing questions to people's answers via print, because I've never done it before? But there's something that I've always been able to do, Dennis, and I've always been able to step out of my comfort zone and challenge myself, or try to take new ideas and new innovations and turn them into something that works not just for me but for other people. So over the years, I've been successfully able to do that. And I suppose when the opportunity came up to be a media spokesperson for the British Association for Counsellors and Psychotherapists, I jumped at the chance, and I've been doing that successfully since 2017. So I like that role as well. And whenever there's an opportunity that comes my way to talk about maybe serious trauma or my profession, that I'm quite able to do that because of my years of experience. So I do love being able to talk effectively about particular topics, and that being mental health, which is a subject which is clearly close to my heart, and I have a lot of expertise in working with thousands and thousands of clients, Dennis. So yeah.
And of course, Glenda, everything that you do is all tied in with your background in counseling and psychotherapy. And just like what you've said, there are so many strands within the area of psychotherapy and counseling. So if you could just share to us what's your line of expertise, what kind of approach do you take on when you deliver a psychotherapy session or a counseling session?
Okay, so for me, so there are two different types of work that I work with. For instance, long-term work for me, I work with the unconscious, the psychotherapeutic work, the unconscious and the strands of a person that are unable to work with the parts of their consciousness that I begin to divulge and work with. And sometimes, Dennis, my work as a psychotherapist can work over not just 1 or 2 years, but 3, 4, sometimes 6, and sometimes 7 years with a client. And I'm working with so many different strands of that person that it becomes so, I suppose a better way of describing my work as a psychotherapist, it's working with the whole of that person, right back from childhood to where they are now. And so many different strands. And I tend to work with energy with my work, and with a high sense of myself. So a real high vibrational energy, that of being mine and that of being the client's. And also very much intuition as well plays a huge part in my practice. as well. And so for my short-term work as a counsellor as well, for my short-term work, I tend to work with different tools as well. So because of my brain injury work and my serious trauma work that I've worked with for many years, especially with insurance companies, I tend to work with some cognitive behavioural therapy tools as well that can come in very, very handy with that type of work, especially when somebody has damaged their brain, which is my expertise. Actually, I work with the physiology, like I said, and the physiology and anatomy of the brain, and being able to draw on both strands of my work is very much something that I've been successful in doing. So not only the brain injury type of my work or the spinal injury clients, but also clients that have really, really deep-rooted or deep-seated issues that I'm able to work with. So from short-term, Dennis, to long-term. And I also am at the point of my work where I very much am able to choose the work that I want to be involved in and want to work with. I won't just work with anybody. It has to be something that I have a special interest in as well for clients. So for me, Dennis, I do work with couples as a couples relationship therapist. I work with serious trauma to somebody's brain, albeit psychological or physical. And that comes from my years of experience in working with brain injured clients. And what I'd like to see eventually, Dennis, is more therapists being trained to work with the physiology and the anatomy of the brain. So understanding the impact, the physical impact, and the psychological and the emotional impact of the brain. I'd like to see that becoming much more widely spread so that therapists can gauge and expand on that training. And right now, there isn't so much training out there for therapists to learn about that. So I'd like to see that developing as we move ahead with our work. I think that's something that's very much needed. And of course, Dennis, that would enable the therapists to then be able to work quite confidently, like I do, with insurance companies that deal with compensation claims, no win, no fee types of work as well, which is something that I'm heavily involved in as well. So I do work with compensation claims as well as clients that come from the street or clients that have been referred to me. And it's not just me that works here at my practice. I do have other qualified members of my team. And Dennis, I also run a placement agency where we have over 30 trainee counsellors. But I know we're going to come on to that afterwards. So, yeah.
No, I just want to touch upon, you said that you help people who have experienced loss and trauma. So can you give us some advice, like general advice, on what kind of coping skills that people who've experienced loss and trauma can implement within their lives?
So coping skills with trauma, there's so many different coping skills, and people need to learn the different types of skills that are out there for each type of therapist. And some of the coping strategies that I install or use in my work very much are because so many people are stressed, and so many people, I feel these days, are very, very much out of synchronicity and unbalanced. But I developed something called a balance wheel, and I look at strands of people's lives that they potentially need to kind of fine tune, really, because I always find, Dennis, that when something is out of synchronicity, then something else goes out of synchronicity. So the balance wheel for me, which I'm quite happy to send you a copy for anybody that would be interested in looking at this balance wheel. But it looks at work, it looks at personal life, it looks at the accomplishments that one wants to develop, it looks at healthy eating, it looks at healthy living, it looks at the whole spectrum of somebody's life, you know, whether it be spending time with family, not enough, why not, what we can implement to fine tune that even more. And there's lots of different strands. If somebody is spending so much time at work, then how on earth are they going to be able to have a successful personal life? And this is why I said initially earlier on, Dennis, to you, that balance is so important in one's life to have. It's okay working 24/7, but it's not really if you've got a family, for instance, because then the family misses out on you. And it's looking at all of the components, they're called, in people's life that they need to bring about balance. So I feel for us, or for me, my practice, I always revert back to a balance wheel and look at the areas of somebody's life that perhaps they need to fine tune. So the balance tool, or the balance wheel as we call it, is something that I often use in my practice. And some other tools. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of different tools that we can use in our practice. But it's before I look at introducing tools, Dennis, I always build up so much trust and understanding in the therapeutic process. And I think that that's so important, because one of the first things that I really explore is building that trust and that relationship with a client. Because if a client doesn't feel comfortable with a therapist and the way that they're working, then the work's just not going to be successful for either party. And it's time that we looked at how best practice we can work together with a client. And not everybody that comes into the therapeutic work is suitable. And I think we have to understand and know our limitations as therapists as well. And we have to be bold enough to say that this is out of my expertise. And we have to know that is the case, so that we can then refer that client on to a therapist that can work successfully with what that client may need. So it's knowing your limitations as a therapist.
Mm-hmm. And of course, aside from knowing your limitations as a therapist, I think it's also important to realize that you have to be very adaptable as a therapist. And when we talk about adaptability, I think when we have to mention like the lockdown, we would have another lockdown again. I think the role of the therapist is becoming even more relevant. And earlier you mentioned about you have a wonderful set of toolkits to help people, cope with their daily struggles. So do you have any advice, or do you have any other tools for helping people to cope with the lockdown?
Well, I think for tool-wise, I think it's so important, Dennis, that people start to have a true and honest and meaningful relationship with themselves. I think that there's so many people out there, Dennis, that don't seem to have an identity, that don't seem to know who they are, because they're living unconscious lives. And what I mean by that is that so many people are on a treadmill of performing, as it were, of doing a job, of pleasing others, of pleasing their bosses, of just surviving. And so many people forget about themselves, about, well, I'm doing this for me. Well, actually, am I doing this for me, or am I doing this for my boss, or am I doing this for my partner, or am I doing this for someone else? And when people start to think consciously what they're doing, who they're doing it for, and what it's about, and what actually is the payoff for them, then they can start to become more aligned with the true selves and start to really get to know who they are. And tool-wise, I think when people start to develop an identity of who they actually are, And when they truly begin to know themselves, I think there's a saying, know thyself, know thy true self, then they're doing things that are aligned with who they are, and they are stopping and thinking for themselves before they rush into something that they find themselves into, and they're not really happy, and they don't understand why they're involved in that in the first place, because they've just followed suit, or they've just done it because it's what's expected of them, or they've just done it because they thought, well, you know, I've got to do it. I've just got to do it. So the more, Dennis, that people can become more aligned with and ask themselves, why am I doing this, whatever it is, for somebody, or, you know, what is this about? How am I actually feeling when I'm engaging, or when I'm giving part of my energy to a situation? I think that these are the things that I'd like people to start asking themselves, checking in with themselves, and not just doing things because of an expectation that's put on them from somewhere else, from a partner, from you know, a parental figure, from, you know, a boss. You know, I think that when people stop and think, why am I actually doing this? What am I getting out of it? Am I actually enjoying this, Dennis? Am I actually, you know, giving my all to this because I want to, as opposed to, am I actually giving my all to this and running on empty because it's what's expected of me? Do you know what I mean? And I think that when people begin to check in with themselves, Dennis, the real congruent reasons why they're doing things, and what they're actually getting, what the benefits are out of a situation that they're imparting themselves into, then the rewards are immense. The rewards are great. The rewards are imaginable, because we then think to ourselves, wow, I'm actually benefiting from this. They're actually benefiting from this. And then that goodness just goes on and on and on and on and on. And Dennis, I have to say, there are far too many really, really bad examples of people doing something just for the sake of it, or doing something just because it's expected of them. And really what they're actually putting into this situation is not good at all. It's kind of like almost like a poison, because if it's coming from a person's not true intentions, then this is what they're putting into a situation. Do you understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I really echo that idea that your self-awareness has to be really congruent with your practice of psychotherapy. Otherwise, it won't really be effective. And I think aside from you know, having a sense of good self-awareness, it's also important that you're familiar with how psychotherapy works. And what I'd just like to ask you is that you know that many different modes of delivering psychotherapy. You can deliver it as an individual form of therapy. You can deliver it as a group therapy.
Yeah.
With the increasing situation that we have right now, there are many counselors and psychotherapists delivering their practice through online. So I was just wondering, as a practitioner, what's your preferred mode of delivery?
So my preferred mode of delivery has always been, Dennis, face-to-face. Has always been to really get a true sense and essence of that person in the same physical space at the same time. I know that we can be in the same physical space via Zoom or via, you know, a medium, which is what we're using at the moment. But I have to say, I'm very, very much old school, and I do feel that a lot of my energy and that of the clients I pick up from when I'm physically in the same space with them. I mean, you know, I do perform my work. It's not a performance, of course, but I do offer my work via this platform, which is what we're using at the moment. But for me, I do find that there is there is a big difference. And from whether it's because I'm used to the fact that it's always been in the same physical space, face to face, in the same, room as a person, or with a group of people, which, I do deliver my practice with groups of people as well. For me, I seem to tune in with their energy much better when they're with me in the same space, in the same room. And I much prefer to be delivering my work this way, in that same physical space, in the same, so that, I catch all of the mannerisms, the feet, the twitching of the knee, the moving of the chair, all of the body language, all of the energy, and the essence of what's actually going on in the room, the energy I pick up from when I'm in that space. I can't pick up that same energy field via this modem we're using today. That's me. I can't talk for other people, but I work much more effectively in the same physical space at the same time, in the same room with somebody, as opposed to being using Zoom or something like this. That's just me. And I know that a lot of my clients, because I've checked in with them when I've offered Zoom sessions, they've said to me, "Oh, it's so much better, Glenda, to see you and to work with you in your practice. I can't get to grips with Zoom, or I feel that it's okay to have check-in sessions." This is what people are saying to me, but they feel my energy and I feel their energy when I'm in that same physical space together at the same time. And I don't know what you feel. I mean, maybe we could try that out, Dennis, but as I'm being interviewed by you today, I don't know what you feel from me. Does it work for you this way?
For everyone who's watching, Glenda and I have met a number of times digitally, but we haven't met in person. But we would have an opportunity to meet in person one point or another, because like I'm also based in Essex, so we're not really miles away. But I understand your perspective that there could really be a barrier if you're doing it virtually, and especially with such an intimate, nature of psychotherapy. It really helps if you can actually see the real person. But then again, a number of psychotherapists really have to, cross that, barrier, because of the lockdown, the changing nature of how we communicate, with not only within the field of counseling, but in other businesses as well. Now, what I'd like to ask you is that earlier you mentioned that you were an agony aunt, and also you're a psychotherapist and a counselor. Now, there will come a time that you kind of already, soak up all the negativities, the trauma, the loss, the problem. So has there ever been a point that you've suffered from compassion fatigue? And if so, how did you navigate that experience?
Well, I think for me, Dennis, I think I have to say a little bit about my background, because I have come from a mixed parentage background on a tough council estate in Deptford. So my dad being black, West Indian, and my mum being white from the East End of London. And when I was brought up in Deptford, I'm in my 50s now, almost late 50s. So when I was being brought up, it was very, very traumatic times for me. We were the only black and white mixed race family on the estate at that time. And because the estate was very dysfunctional, and including that of my family, unfortunately, because of the environmental pressures that affected both my parents, this resulted in both having kind of substance, alcohol misuse and all the rest of it. So We were, I've got a brother and a sister, and we were targeted quite often because of the colour of my skin, unfortunately, and people not understanding that my parents were in love and all they wanted was to be able to bring us up in peace. But it wasn't easy. We were, targeted and abused quite often by people on the estate because of being different. So there were lots of different dysfunctional issues on the estate where I lived, and I witnessed so many different problems, from drug on the estate to extreme alcohol intoxication and to murder as well. One of my best friends was murdered on the estate where I was brought up, and I never ever forgot that, because it left a huge void in my life, and I never trusted my environment at all growing up. Unfortunately, I just kept my head down, Dennis, worked on the market stalls, saved up enough money to try and escape the dysfunctional life that I was living or involved in. And I did escape it eventually. But what that did for me was it kind of imparted so much. I suppose I, from first hand, understood the word resilience, and it allowed me, my background, to face and manage and deal with a lot of the trauma that happened in my life afterwards, as well as during my childhood. And all of the trauma that happened as a child to me and as a young person growing up, it left me needing, of course, therapy, which I have had and still have throughout my whole life. But for me, Dennis, that's been, I suppose, the lifesaver for me as a successful therapist, as it were. I'm not ashamed to say that I have so much therapy when I need to, and I think that that's good practice. Actually, I would encourage other therapists to continue with their therapy. And I think for me, Dennis, throughout my whole career as a therapist, I've been able to manage successfully and balance my work, especially in serious trauma, and my personal life. And of course, for me, having such a supportive family has been the core foundation for my success as a therapist, especially as I'm running a really, really busy practice with over 30 trainee counsellors, as well as experienced counsellors that we have as well, and psychotherapists. So I learned at such a young age how to manage and compartmentalize the stuff that I don't need to deal with. That's not saying that I didn't deal with it, because I did, but I can put stuff in a bit of a box and then revisit it when I need to, which is what I've done throughout my life. So if I have a really, really difficult, complex, traumatic case to deal with, which I do, of course I have my supervision ongoing regularly, sometimes much more than others, but because I've got that support, because I've got the support of my peers as well, family, I seamlessly seem to be able to navigate and manage what comes to me. And one of the things I learned to deal with in my childhood was just that, to put it to one side, and then of course having therapy, managing that stuff, dealing with that stuff and moving forward. So not becoming stuck and feeling disempowered by whatever is affecting me. And I know that there are a lot of people that do take on the work, unfortunately, and become quite sick, whether it be that they develop IBS, whether it be other symptoms of whatever it is that they take on board from our work. But one of the things I always do as a therapist is I always protect myself. And that's kind of like a thing that I always ask for my higher self, for my own protection. I probably people be thinking to themselves, who is she asking protection from? Well, it's my higher self that I'm asking protection from. So I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm very much protected from the lower energies that we probably don't always see or feel, but they are there, the lower energies. And sometimes what can happen is when people, or therapists especially, become unbalanced or take on too much work, or they're not looking after themselves, then the work that they're dealing with can almost become quite affected by and stuck with, and sometimes traumatized by as well. And that then affects them. And of course they become sick. But I've learned I've learned to manage that, I suppose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like what you've said earlier, it's not a profession that is suitable for everyone. So you really have to have a strong skill set, and of course you have to be someone who has learned from your live experience, like where you've talked about your formative years has rather been challenging, and I suppose that kind of informed the way you help your clients in return. Now, what I want to ask you, Glenda, is there a particular individual who has the greatest influence to how you approach counseling and psychotherapy?
Okay, so I'd like to talk to you, if I can, about a particular piece of work that I was involved in back in 2012. So I think I've mentioned to you, Dennis, before that I work with solicitors and lawyers and compensation claims. And it was during that time that I received a phone call from a solicitor. I'm not going to say which one, but I'd had some communication and work from this particular solicitor before. So they knew my work and they knew how I might be able to help somebody who had sustained a serious brain injury. And obviously for confidentiality reasons, I can't go into naming anyone's names, but I can just give you a sense of this work. So the solicitor said to me, Glenda, can you go in and do your magic with this particular client? And I thought to myself, I know what she means, because in working with some really, really complex cases, I like to be challenged with complex cases. And I took up the work. So it was a bit of a different type of work. So it was using all of my skill set, but it was also a work that I'd never done before. And on meeting this particular client, of course, I'd read the case management files and all of the medical reports in terms of what this client had been through and her injuries. So this particular client, let's call her Shannon, for instance. So I went to meet Shannon. That's not her name, obviously, but I went to meet Shannon, and Shannon was supported by a 24/7 package of carers, because Shannon couldn't communicate, so she was locked in syndrome, so she couldn't use her voice, she couldn't use her arms, her legs, she couldn't do anything. She was basically in a wheelchair because she had sustained a serious trauma on a road traffic accident. And unfortunately for this particular client, Shannon, she had been crossing the road and somebody had run her over. They had a heart attack. So this particular client was locked in syndrome and needed 24/7 care. So on meeting this particular client, I introduced myself and had to spend, I believe, about 5 months building up trust, visiting this client, and learning how to use something called an eye gaze system. So an eye gaze system is a computerized system, a collaborated computer eye gaze system where the client would use their eyes visually to pinpoint images on the computer and make the sentences with her eyes. And therefore the sentences would join and we'd be able to know what this client was referring to. But it's quite hard on a person's fatigue on the brain. It's quite hard work to use this system, especially somebody like Shannon. So not only did Shannon have to learn how to use the computerized eye gaze system, but I had to as well, because then I had to be able to converse and talk through the eye gaze system to Shannon. And that was hard for me to do because I'd never ever worked in this way before. But on building up so much trust, not just with Shannon, but with her carers, I came up with a fantastic plan. And the plan was to introduce Shannon to do an activity with me that we could challenge parts, not a part, but parts of her psyche, parts of her brain that perhaps weren't being challenged or functioning in a way. I didn't know. I'm not a neuropsychologist. So it was all by chance this happened. And remember, Shannon couldn't talk, okay? So the idea that I came up with, Dennis, was brilliant, actually, and it's not out of this world. It was to take this particular client to a festival, not just any festival, but it was a festival for people with disabilities where they could engage in zip wire, abseiling, swimming, horse riding, social activities with other people that weren't only disabled but were fully functioning as well. So I had a video of this place, which was absolutely phenomenal, by the sea, called, well, I'm not going to say where it was because it would just give too much away, but anyway, and on showing Shannon the video of potentially what she could do, and her carers were there and they were standing in the background like this, Dennis, looking unmotivated. But Shannon was motivated, and I could see in her eyes that she wanted to partake. She wanted to engage in the zip wire and the abseiling and all the activities that she could potentially do. And of course, everything is risk assessed. I'm not silly, everything is possible. It's possible for somebody in a wheelchair to do. But you see, her carers were saying to me, how is she going to do this? What's the point? There's no point. She's not going to be able to enjoy this. So I ignored the carers, because at the end of the day, this wasn't about them. This was about her. This was about introducing something other than being in a wheelchair 24/7, going to the shops, eating, going to sleep, getting up and continuing the same life. This was about bringing something new and invigorating into her life. So Shannon blinked and this was a weekend away where she could engage in all of these activities. And I said, okay, before you agree to doing this, why don't I take you there and you can check this out for yourself? So I did. I took her there with her carers, and her carers still were very much like this, Dennis. Well, we don't actually see the point, but there you go. So when Shannon visited this place, her eyes lit up, Dennis. Her eyes lit up, and she was so excited that she wanted to do everything there, everything that was on the list. So I went back to the solicitor and I said, it's a done deal, but I've got a problem. The carers are really unmotivated, and I don't want to, it's not my job to motivate them. I'll take my own team along, which actually, you know, I took some of my team and I took the team that she already had along to this wonderful festival, this wonderful weekend. And Dennis, this is groundbreaking stuff that I'm going to tell you what happened, because this went into my statement. I have to produce a statement for the courts. Okay. So basically what happened was, on arrival at this wonderful place with the carers, with my team, wonderful day, the sun was shining, I said to my client, would you like to do the zip wire? And she said, well, not spoke, but blinked. 2 blinks for yes, 1 blink for no. 2 blinks for yes. Okay? So I explained so much about what it would entail. She would be harnessed with the helmet on. She would go up about 25 foot at this mountainside in the wheelchair, of course. What was going to happen when she got up to the top was the wheelchair would be turned around and she would go down the zip wire, and I would be at the other end filming her, and I would be there to meet her. And I explained this about 4 or 5 times because I needed to make sure she understood what she was getting herself in for. Okay? Or into. So, being harnessed right up the top, client smiling, Shannon smiling, repeating. She wants to go. Blinking twice. I get to the other end. She's coming down. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I hope she likes it. But she's smiling, Dennis. When she got to the other end, when I was there to meet her on camera, she spoke her first words, Dennis, which was, Glenda, I'm so happy. Can I do the zip wire again? And her carers were jumping for joy. My team were jumping for joy. I was jumping for joy because she doesn't speak. She didn't speak. And since then, she hasn't stopped speaking, Dennis. So there was something that I said to Shannon afterwards, because she wanted to do so much zip wire and abseiling and everything else and telling us all about, it was just phenomenal. And I said to the solicitor, you need to watch this video. And they said, how did you get her to talk? And I said, I don't know. But Dennis, it was my true intention. She connected with me. This is what I mean by energy. You can't pick up this energy on Zoom. I needed to be there with her. I needed to spend these 6 months building up trust with her. I needed that with her to do. And she spoke. So all the neuropsychologists, what did you do? How did this happen? And it was my true intention, stepping out of my comfort zone, which is what I said earlier on in this interview, providing something that was a bit out of the ordinary. You see, therapists don't usually do this, but this is something that I did. You see? So she speaks. So she's no longer locked-in syndrome.
And exactly, and these special moments, these miraculous moments, this makes your role as a psychotherapist and as a counselor even more fulfilling and even more rewarding. And thank you so much for sharing that truly remarkable story. And of course, aside from all of these things that you do, you still manage to find the time to host your own podcast. So if you could just share to us your podcast, which is the Emotional Wellbeing Podcast. If you could just share to us what's your most memorable episode during your podcast.
Oh, wow. Okay. So yes, Kid Bachelor and I are very, very good friends. We go back some 30 years, and we decided, because of Kid's interest in mental health and obviously mine, that we were going to produce not just any old podcast, but in-depth conversations and no frills, just truth of somebody's life and how life has affected them, and then being able to share with us how that's been. So yes, Kid and I, we do produce some fantastic podcast shows, and you can catch the podcast shows on the mixcloud.com/UXWBOB/podcasts. And one of the most memorable, I want to say, I've done a few with Kid, but one of the most memorable podcast shows I have really, really enjoyed, and I traveled all the way to Aberdeenshire to interview this wonderful lady, Rabina Lund. Now, Rabina Lund, you see, she was J.P. Getty, one of the richest men in the world, the oil tycoon of the century, J. Paul Getty. She was his personal advisor, so his lawyer, and she was also his lover. And we made a podcast show for the public, and we made one off camera as well for me, for my own, just to understand her in great depth. So Rabina Lund was one of the most, and still is one of the most phenomenal women people I have ever met in the whole wide world of my profession today, because she told me about a time when she remembered before she was born, being in her mother's womb and remembering a conversation that her parents were having. And she almost said that she wanted to be part of that conversation, but she couldn't because she was inside the mum's tummy. But she said she remembered being born. And I just found that phenomenal. And her brain is a brain that is what we call somebody who is able to remember so much information. I don't know how she does it, but she can still do it today. And no wonder she was J. Paul Getty's lawyer. No wonder she was able to manage this man's business, which is what she did. And no wonder she is still living very, very healthily today and successfully today. And she shared so many secrets with me, which I shared a few on the podcast. But she is a phenomenal person, a phenomenal human being. And I think for me, she's been somebody who I immensely enjoyed interviewing for the podcast show because of her knowledge, because of her past, because of her expertise in her field, in her life. And her father, I want to say, he's no longer with us, but his name was Sir Thomas Lund. Now, Sir Thomas Lund, Dennis, was the inventor of the legal aid system in the whole of the world. And he came up with the idea to help the common person, to receive the support from solicitors that they need without the high costs of solicitors' fees. So he came up with this wonderful invention. And, this knowledge and expertise is genetic. It was passed on to Robina Lund. And Robina Lund successfully worked with J. Paul Getty, who I have to say had been one of the most successful businessmen ever to have lived, this oil tycoon. And I had the privilege to meet Robina Lund. And not only that, she invited me into her home and made me feel extremely welcome. And I didn't want to leave because I felt so part of her life. And I don't know whether you, Dennis, of the people that you interview for your shows, but I don't know whether you ever feel, wow, I just want to learn so much more from these people. This is one of the ladies that I've wanted to learn so much more from. And she says to me, Glenda, well, you know so much. I don't know anything. I mean, I know a bit, but compared to her knowledge and understanding of the world back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and what she was dealing with, it's just phenomenal, Dennis. And I don't know anybody, and I've never met any person ever who can describe what it has been like to have lived in the womb. There you go.
That is really an episode worth checking out. What I'll do, Glenda, is I'll pop in the link to your podcast so everyone can listen to that episode. By the way you tell it, this is really an interesting episode, overflowing with nuanced experience, not just in psychotherapy, but I suppose with other aspects of life as well. Now, of course, Glenda, aside from your podcast, you're also involved with Solar Radio, and of course, we're happy to announce that Solar Radio is also one of the media partners for the upcoming Good Mental Health Festival. And Tanya and I are really grateful for your involvement. We're really looking forward to this event. And just share to the audience, the listeners, what Solar Radio is all about and what kind of role you'll be taking in for the Good Mental Health Festival.
Well, no, Dennis, that's mine and kids' pleasure. We're so happy to be part. I know Solar Radio. I speak on behalf of Solar Radio as well. We're so happy to be part of, however much or however little that means. Now, Solar Radio, a multiple award-winning radio show that deals with, I want to say, soul music. And also jazz, which is my love, jazz music. And, they have so many good DJs, one being Mr. Kid Bachelor, who presents a weekly show on Solar Radio. And the weekly show that Kid produces on Solar Radio isn't just any old show, actually. It's a show that is full of education as well for whatever's going on in the world. And Kid presents that so succinctly, professional, and it's delivered with such immense care. Now, what we're doing on Solar Radio for the Good Mental Health Festival that you're organising is we're going to have a part in that, so that we can stream or we can cover part of your Good Mental Health Festival. And we're only too delighted to input music, to obviously try to interview some of the guests that you have as speakers, as keynote speakers at your festival. And we're really excited to be part of that. And I'm just so, I'm just so kind of wondering how this is going to be, because of course it's a virtual Good Mental Health Festival. And I know Dennis and yourself, Tanya Diggory, wanted to have, before the COVID, you wanted to have a festival where it would be in person, and you probably had lots of ideas of how that was going to look and how that was going to look like. So now you're going to have this on a virtual platform, and I'm really excited to see how that's going to pan out, but equally as excited to be part of that. And I know that Solar Radio and Kid Bachelor and I are so looking forward to that. So yeah, that's going to be so exciting.
It's really an interesting partnership. Like what you've said, we initially planned this to be an in-person event, but of course, because of the challenges of the current situation, we have no choice but to set it out as a virtual festival. But of course, there's a beauty in that, because it opens, participation from the rest of the world, from countries, from people from other countries who would not, able to go to London, because we initially planned this to be set in London. But Glenda, alongside all of this, you're a very busy counselor. You also work for Solar Radio and other charities. But what else is in the pipeline?
Okay, thanks for that, Dennis. So in the pipeline, and I am really excited to share this as well. So for your listeners or your viewers as well, we made a film only last year, and the film that I made was to do with the effects of trolling, the effects of social media on young people and on people in general. But we chose a young person to show the effects of how social media can affect somebody who's consistently being trolled in a negative way on social media. So I made a film. I got together with an actress, and we made this film, and the film is called Dying to Be Famous. You can actually see the film or follow the link on the justtalk2019.com website or on the bacp.co.uk website, and it shows the effects of trolling. Now, when I released this film, I used the film as a tool in schools and colleges for potentially young people to be prepared for for things that might affect them. Okay, and for parents who didn't really understand about Instagram and social media and all that sort of stuff, so it helps them as well. But what happened was, through releasing this film, I kind of got in contact, or she got in contact, and we got in contact with each other with a fantastic, already established documentary maker and short film producer and director. Her name is Donna Taylor, and she runs a company called DT Films that are based in Essex. She saw the film, loved the film, and it just so happened to be part of the same kind of why don't we get together, Glenda, and try to produce something that's going to help people, because she's a school teacher by day, and she's also a filmmaker and a documentary maker, like I said, by night. So we then came up with this fantastic idea give something back to our community, albeit Essex and Suffolk, to with her understanding of making films and my understanding of the mental health, that we would come up with Just Talk with DT Film. So we've developed a social enterprise, or we're at the early stages of developing this social enterprise, called Just Talk with DT Films. And basically, we are going to be empowering young people through film, through therapy, and through the struggles that they already have in the world, especially since COVID-19 has hit home. We are developing and exploring ways in which we can engage the schools, the colleges, the young people, and create packages so that the schools and the school children can develop their own sense of who they are. So basically, we will make a film, Dennis, and that film will potentially be about maybe transgender, or maybe be about social anxiety. So we'll develop probably the first 10 minutes of the film, and then we'll show the film in the schools. The schools and the school children will then get into groups and discuss how they would like the ending of the film to be. So what's going to be happening here is, Dennis, we won't say to the school children how we want the film to finish. We will empower the school children by getting them in groups, them having discussions about, well, if we finish it this way, then that's going to have this impact potentially on that person or this person. So they will then develop the ending of the film, okay? And we'll develop that with them. They'll come up with the ending, but we'll put that together, and it will almost be their ending, their film, if you see what I mean. But where then we come in again is we will offer therapy to the young person. So if we're covering something to do with social anxiety, and there's maybe 4 or 5 school children that are actually experiencing social anxiety, we will offer therapy before they engage in the workshops. So we'll give them about maybe, 5, 6, 7, even 10 sessions of therapy. After the sessions of therapy, they will then hopefully be ready to then join the group, mm-hmm. and then get back involved, mm-hmm. in delivering the ending of the film. So we're not going to take over the schools, and this is not a new way of teaching the young people, but it's just going to be an added on service so that we can tackle things like, body dysmorphia, for instance, personality disorders, and there's so many different strands of personality disorders, but we want to tackle these areas because, the school teachers don't have this expertise, and we do. So we could do this through our films. So there's a lot of different strands that, where, that we feel the schools will, and the colleges and the universities can and will benefit from us developing this unique platform for them to be involved in. And what we've done already, Dennis, we've developed our first Kickstarter film so that we can raise the funds to make the first film. And the Kickstarter details I'm going to give to you, Dennis, afterwards. And if you wouldn't mind kind of putting that out there, then people can donate to that event. So yeah, so that should be
really an exciting co-creation project. You're involving the school, you're involving the community, and of course you're involving the children and the adolescents. And I'm really interested to see that film that you've mentioned, Dying to Be Famous, and it's really relevant. A lot of you've said that it's not just the adolescents, but also the adults who can experience being bullied or being trolled online. So it's really interesting to see that. Now, it's been an insightful conversation with you, Glenda, but unfortunately our time is up. I've learned so much about your line of work. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise. I really look forward to hearing more about your work. And yeah, just send in those links, and then I'll pop it in the description box.
Oh,
Again,
lovely.
Glenda.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Bye-bye.
Bye.